Today's McGonagall poem is called A Tale of the Sea, and I think this one calls for a proper accent when reading it, and not necessarily a Scottish one. So here it is. A pathetic tale of the sea I will unfold, enough to make one's blood run cold, concerning four fishermen cast adrift in a dory. As I've been told, I'll relate the story. 'Twas on the 8th April, on the afternoon of that day, that the village of Louisburg was thrown into a wild state of dismay. And the villagers flew to the beach in a state of wild uproar, and in a dory they found four men were cast ashore. Then the villagers in surprise assembled about the dory, and they found that the bottom of the boat was gory. Then their hearts were seized with sudden dread, when they discovered that two of the men were dead. And the two survivors were exhausted from exposure, hunger and cold, which caused the spectators to shudder with them when they did behold. And with hunger the poor men couldn't stand on their feet. They felt so weakly on their legs for want of meat. They were carried to a boarding house without delay, but those that were looking on were stricken with dismay, when the remains of James and Angus McDonald were found in the boat, and likewise 3 pieces of flesh in a pool of blood afloat. Angus McDonald's right arm was missing from the elbow, and the throat was cut in a sickening manner which filled the villagers' hearts with woe, especially when they saw 2 pieces of flesh had been cut from each thigh. It was then the kind-hearted villagers did murmur and sigh. Angus MacDonald must have felt the pangs of hunger before he did try to cut 2 pieces of flesh from James MacDonald's thigh. But oh heaven, the pangs of hunger were very hard to thaw, and anything that's eatable is precious to an hungry soul. Alas, it is most pitiable and horrible to think that with hunger Christians will each other's blood drink, and eat each other's flesh, to save themselves from starvation. But the pangs of hunger make them mad, and drives them to desperation. An old American soldier that had passed through the Civil War declared the scene surpassed anything he'd seen by far, and at the sight the crowd in horror turned away, which no doubt they will remember for many a day. Colin Chisholm, one of the survivors, was looking very pale, stretched on a sofa at the boarding house, making his wail. Poor fellow! His feet was greatly swollen, and with a melancholy air he gave the following account of the distressing affair. We belonged to the American fishing schooner named Sicily, and our captain was a brave man called Mackenzie. And the vessel had 14 hands altogether, and during the passage we had favourable weather. 'Twas on March the 17th we sailed from Gloucester on the Wednesday, and all our hearts felt buoyant and gay, as we arrived on the western banks on the succeeding Tuesday, while the time unto us seemed to pass merrily away. About 8 o'clock in the morning we left the vessel in a dory, and I hope all kind Christians will take heed of my story. Well, while we were at work, the sky began to frown, and with a dense fog we were suddenly shut down. Then we hunted and shouted, and ever in nerve did strain, thinking to find our schooner, but alas, it was all in vain, because a thick fog hid the vessel from our view. To keep ourselves warm, we closely to each other drew. We had not one drop of water, nor provisions of any kind, which alas soon began to tell on our mind, especially upon James MacDonald, who was very thinly clad, and with the cold and hunger he felt almost mad. And looking from the stern where he was lying, he said, "Goodbye, mates, oh, I am dying." Poor fellow, we kept his body thinking the rest of us would be saved. Then with hunger Angus MacDonald began to cry, and madly raved. And he cried, "O God, send us some kind of meat, because I am resolved to have something to eat. Oh, do not let us starve on the briny flood, or else I will drink of poor Jim's blood." Then he suddenly seized his knife and cut off poor Jim's arm, not thinking in his madness he'd done any harm. Then poor Jim's blood he did drink, and his flesh did eat, declaring that the blood tasted like cream and was a treat. Then he asked me to taste it, saying it was good without doubt. Then I tasted it, but in disgust I instantly spat it out, saying if I was to die within an hour on the briny flood, I would neither eat the flesh nor drink the blood. Then in the afternoon again he turned to me, saying, "I'm going to cut Jim's throat for more blood, do you see?" And I begged of him, for Christ's sake, not to cut the throat of poor Jim. But he cried, "Aha, to save my own life, I consider it no sin." I tried to prevent him, but he struck me without dismay, and cut poor Jim's throat in defiance of me, for all I could say. Also a piece of flesh from each thigh, and began to eat away. But poor fellow, he sickened about noon, and died on the Sunday. Now it is all over, and I will thank all my life, who has preserved me and my mate McEachin in the midst of danger and strife. And I hope that all landsmen of low and high degree will think of the hardships of poor mariners while at sea. Well, that's a little different from his usual fare. We'll be back tomorrow with something a little less macabre. We'll see you then.